Greetings to everyone. It's that special time of year for the video industry, and much as I think we'd all like to be walking around Amsterdam and enjoying the art and culture of that city, we are still in a period where there's a rich amount of news to cover, and IBC is doing a terrific job of creating an environment for virtual panel sessions, and this webinar sponsored by Aceto is one of those topic areas that I think you'll be catching your interest, and we hope to have a 45 minutes or so of good discussion about the issues of complexity in the video industry. My name is Steve Christian. I'm now a consultant in marketing strategy in the video industry. I've got about 25 years of video industry experience behind me, and things have changed. The only constant is change, as they say. I'm joined today by two very senior members of the industry who themselves had quite a long track record in the business. I'm going to let them introduce themselves. Frederick, can you talk about yourself a little bit, your role, where you're speaking from, and Aceto in general?
Sure, thank you for that, Steve, and thanks for being here. My name is Frederick Anderson. I'm the co-founder, SVP of products at Aceto. I'm currently in Stockholm, not too far from Amsterdam. So the very quick story about Aceto is that we design, build, and manage video services for telecom providers and media companies across the world.
Terrific, thanks very much. Now, Mosi, talk a little bit about you and your role.
Yeah, hi, Steve. So, yeah, my role, my name is Mosi Chakra, of course, and I'm working in AWS as part of the telecom business unit. My role is really to help telecom operators and pay TV operators navigate this transformation from the TV and media standpoint. And so we're working very closely with telecom operators, understanding their projects, their challenges, and then working with partners in order to address those challenges. So basically, in a nutshell, that's my role.
Thanks very much. I'm sure that keeps you pretty busy. So,
absolutely.
So the next 45 minutes, we're going to cover a few topics, and coming back to the sort of complexity of the landscape that confronts the video operator these days, and how Aceto with their own particular contribution and AWS with the cloud actually helps to address some of the issues of complexity and help operators be more successful in their own business areas. This webinar will be basically have no online Q&A, so don't expect to be submitting questions for us to answer in real time. The Q&A process is going to be offline. We'd like you as viewers of the webinar to submit your questions to marketing@aceto.tv, and the team at Aceto will respond to those questions as rapidly as possible after the webinar goes out. We look forward to hearing from you about what we've covered well, what different opinions that you might have, and you know, other contributions to the overall debate here. Thanks very much, and so let's sort of dive into it. To kick off here the discussion, I want to ask a very broad question and get the responses from both the Aceto camp, from Frederick, and from AWS via Mosi. The big elephant in the room, of course, is this huge sort of disruption and period of change that we're going through, partly triggered by, you know, the inevitable march of technology, and we've seen some things which you know, are really phenomenal changes in the technology of video delivery. But you know, the bigger picture also includes the current situation that everyone finds themselves in, where information and entertainment is, you know, coming to them in different kinds of ways, and you know, the whole video industry has had to respond to a dramatic, maybe accelerated change in the landscape of how people access and consume that information and entertainment. So ask to Frederick initially, and to get things going. What are a couple of things in that big, you know, landscape of change, disruptive environment? A couple of things that you've seen as kind of inevitable areas of change, and maybe something that's caught you by surprise. Frederick.
Well, just to take a step back, I mean, yes, it's really a disruption happening now, but I think, I'm hoping I'm not offending anyone, but at least all of this in this call seem to have some gray hairs, and I think we've been to our fair share of IBCs. I was actually surprised how long time it has taken for the industry to actually change. We've had benchmarks with Netflix on the side for a very long time. I think it has taken a few more years than I had expected for the industry to change. It was a very conservative industry, especially I'd say the operators and the telecom providers have been slow to respond. And then I'm also a bit surprised now when it actually has happened that it hasn't led to even more consolidation, because if you look at the ecosystem, I think we have, unfortunately, a number of former colleagues and friends who are struggling in their companies. And I would have assumed that this would lead to even more consolidation in the marketplace. I mean, we've seen some, but not on the level I had expected. Those are a few observations from my side.
Mosi, what do you think? What's sort of the inevitable pace of change, and what's a surprising kind of insight that we've gained over the last I don't know, 6 months or so?
Yeah, absolutely. So, as you know, in Amazon and AWS, we are customer obsessed. So my starting point will be from the end customer, who is the subscriber, which happily happens to be basically you, Steve, you, Frederick, and myself, right? We are all subscribers, and we are all keen on watching the best content at the best time. So I think we all agree that there's a lot of trends and there's a lot of perspectives that we can take this question, but let me insist on two of them, and I apologize in advance in case I am a little bit biased towards service providers or pay TV operators. But the first thing as a subscriber is really that we are in a crowded space, right? I mean, previously we had one service provider, one TV offering, and now all of a sudden we have a plethora of services, and it has become very difficult to choose what is the best service and what time, and it has become even a challenge to basically know what you would like to watch in your evening, right? Is it the news? Is it a series? Is it a documentary? Is it a movie? Is it sports? So I think this is the first level of complexity that any OTT provider has to worry about, is how to simplify this multiple offerings, and how to make sure that their subscribers get access to the right content as they need it. And if we now go a step further and look at the now the pay TV operators and service providers, I think their main issue is that now they are struggling with multiple layers of investment who have started probably a decade ago, from the very early IPTV platforms to upgrades and new features. And then OTT came in, and then a lot of disruptions. And if you look at it, most of the pay TV operators today have multiple platforms and multiple generation of set-top boxes and multiple generations of content management systems. And this is causing a headache in terms of management, in terms of operations, increased costs. And the most important of all of this is that this is not customer centric, right? I mean, the customer should not be worrying about what kind of service, what kind of device, or what kind of tool that they are using in order to access the content. So simplifying all of this is, I think, a first priority for all pay TV operators.
Terrific. So what I was just going to pick up on something that maybe surprised you about that kind of environment. Was there something that was particularly surprising about the changes just recently, or is it that whole perspective about you know, the layers of investment and the complexity of navigating all of that, Mosi?
Yeah, that's what we are hearing from our customers as we talk to them. And of course, this is not the whole picture. I mean, we can add to that a lot of other parameters, and one of the parameters is this, you know, positioning between the native OTT operator or provider, such as the hyperscalers, the world hyperscalers, together with the local service provider or telecom service provider or pay TV operator. And what is this relationship? Is it a conflictual relationship? Is it something that that could be turned into cooperation or partnership model? So these are also other perspectives to the questions. But as I said, there are many other facets to this complexity, and we can dive deep into that in many other dimensions.
Facets. Yes, complexity is the watchword here, I think, for all of us. We get into that complexity topic. Oh, go ahead, Frederick, please. Yeah.
No, I was just thinking, do you see any regional differences in terms of how operators are treating their environments, or is this more about a maturity thing than regional?
Oh yeah, there's yeah, there are gaps. I mean, incredible gaps between, for example, the market in North America, and even between North America and Canada. Sorry, between the United States and Canada. There are fundamental differences there. But then you look at, you know, big service providers like AT&T and Comcast and Verizon and many others. They have all made their choice and transition to the cloud. And you look at other operators who are still in the stance of saying, oh, the cloud is not yet viable for me. And that happens in many regions. And then you look at other markets like Asia Pacific, where the trend is also very favorable in terms of using the cloud. And I'm currently spending my nights actually in evenings with customers in that market. So there is a big discrepancy between the different regions of the world, and every region has its own specific challenges basically in adopting the cloud and transforming their TV business.
Yeah, I found sometimes that the irony is that it's not always about the technology perspective. Sometimes some companies have a specific view on a sort of financial setup, so they prefer capex versus opex, which then leads them to different decisions, which is a bit ironic, but it's the reality, I guess. Do you see the same thing?
Right.
Yeah, correct. I think one of the things that you know, culturally we need to basically educate about is that using or transforming the business using the AWS cloud is fundamentally different than on-premise. And you look at it from the cost perspective, for example, the economy of scale that AWS has in terms of you know, investments in data, in infrastructure and network lead to, in most of the cases, if not all of them, to a substantial decrease in total cost of ownership. And if you add to that the fact that with AWS, you have also a plethora of services that can allow you to develop and go very quickly in developing new features and innovate. That's also something that is very compelling to telecom operators and to service providers in general. So yeah, I agree to that, and that perfectly resonates to what we are seeing in the market.
Terrific. I want to ask another question about sort of the general marketplace. well, I guess this year has seen the launch and rise of some significant new OTT players. I'm thinking Disney Plus. I'm thinking HBO Max. But the competitive landscape for such offerings seems to be more and more daunting as time goes on, right? So, what do you see as, from your point of view, the critical success factors for launching either a niche or a general new service in this very competitive marketplace, Frederick?
Well, I think if you're going to compete with the big ones, there are most likely limited space, right? And content is definitely key. But we do see there's lots of room for regional providers and niche content, where we see big growth from our customer base, and there is a huge demand for that type of content. So I think,
so your customers are surviving or thriving alongside of these big new launches and the incumbents, of course, right? So.
Yeah, but I think you have to play the game, right? If you're a local, for example, Scandinavian provider, it's tough to compete with Netflix and Disney on the blockbuster movie scene. You have to then realize that you need to add maybe local content in order to have a differentiating aspect in order to compete, right? So the Netflix and the Disney strategy is not right for everyone. You have to define your strategy and find your audience and your customers, right? But I think, now most service providers are mature enough to realize this. I think there were a few years when many companies just launched stuff, but I think now maturity is better, and people realize that they need to have an edge, right? And they think about these things.
How do you see that situation, Mosi?
Well, I would double down on what Frederick just said. I mean, the first big question that any new service operator want to ask is, what is my market, right? And this is not the end of the story. I mean, once I identify my market, this is not the end of the story. The constant question and the recurrent question that operator needs to ask is, how can I constantly expand my addressable market? So yes, geographically, I might be limited to France, or I might be limited to French speaking languages, or I might be limited to North America. But is there a possibility to go a little bit more global? Is there a possibility to address the whole, let us say, group of people that is currently not being addressed because the network is not allowing me to do so? So I think it's not just a matter of, what is my market? It's also, how can I expand my market every day? And here I would like to make sure that, the message is very well seen, is that there is no way that any operator or any OTT provider can scale globally without leveraging the cloud. The cloud has that unique capability of being able to expand very quickly, and you can expand globally, and that in minutes, basically. And so therefore, the cloud has become a really important factor in deciding what infrastructure I need to use in order to deploy my service. And you look at the most of the services that are being launched today from those hyperscalers and from pay TV operators, they are all leveraging the cloud by some way or another. And so this is in line with that requirement. So that's really very good. And we have seen a lot of success stories where, a simple broadcaster or simple content owner who is localized, and then all of a sudden they go global, and they go, to Africa, and they go to Southeast Asia, etc., and they can really scale very well. So it's the success stories around the world are emphasizing that this is the trend.
I'd like to stress another related point to that. I mean, scale is obviously important, but I think agility and flexibility is also something that comes with the cloud, right? And that is key if you want to succeed, because what we see working with our customers, it's very seldom you get it right the first time, because you need to be humble and you need to try things, and then you need to have this agile mentality and constantly test things, and then you need the flexibility that the cloud can offer. That is also key.
Sure. So I think that brings up the question of complexity and to some extent vendor lock-in, right? And I think Aceto has got at least their approach to trying to avoid, try to minimize complexity and avoid vendor lock-in. So Frederick, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yes, I mean, as many knows, Aceto has done our fair share of custom deployments around the world, and we all know that the ecosystem is very, very complicated, and that means that having this flexibility that we talk about is typically only for the very big ones, right? They have the mentality, the knowledge, the maturity, and the money and the budget to actually build something which is very scalable and very flexible. But what we have tried to do with our new product, Aceto One, is to democratize this a bit. So we have with this SaaS platform a open marketplace where partners can integrate. There are open APIs, which means that if you are a video service provider, you can start with a specific setup. But if you grow out of this setup and needs another partner, you can add that partner. Or if you need a stronger partner in certain area, you can then have that discussion without starting from scratch. So essentially, we're trying to democratize scale and flexibility for non-tier 1 customers.
Very interesting.
And I can give an example of this complexity specifically related to analytics and basically customer segmentation and insights. And currently, one of the big topics that OTT suppliers are investing in is how to build that data lake with all that information that they are generating. And we're speaking about gigabytes of data sometimes every hour, and hundreds of gigabytes per day of data. And the biggest challenge that is encountered is that you have a platform, so you have your CMS, which is giving you some information, and then you have the front end, which is giving you a whole lot of other information. Then you have the player in the app, which gives you also a lot of valuable information on how the user is interacting with the content. You continue as well with the CDN and delivery. Are you using a public CDN such as Amazon CloudFront or another public CDN compared to your own CDN that you are operating by yourself? And it's a very vast, it's very complicated set of data sets that you are collecting. And here again, the cloud is the best solution, because then you can scale to those amount of data, and then you can filter them, you can condition the data and put it in the right format, and then you can centralize all of that into a data lake, and then you can consolidate that data lake on a regular basis, consolidating the information on hourly basis or daily basis and then monthly basis. And then what happens is that once you have that data lake, you can build sophisticated algorithms, mostly based on machine learning, in order to gain the right insights about your subscriber, so that you know that your subscriber is happy with that content, and therefore you can use that information in order to push more content similar to that one, or you know that this subscriber is no longer using the service because of whatever reason, and therefore you can address that subscriber with some pertinent offering that will bring that subscriber back to the system. So 100% with Frederick's point here, and I think data collection and analytics are a very perfect example of that.
For sure, yeah. I think we may return to the topic of data analytics a little later in the session here. What I wanted to just explore a little bit, Mosi, is for sure cloud is a common denominator to pretty much all operator activities or in launches or infrastructure in this day and age. But the cloud isn't necessarily an answer in itself, right? It's not a one size fits all kind of thing. How do you, you in your role or AWS, help customers navigate the complexities and the new opportunities that exist in the cloud space? What's the secret sauce that you bring?
I'm not sure whether there is a real secret sauce, honestly, Steve. But yes, it's a very pertinent question in the sense that, as we mentioned earlier, customers have different levels of cloud maturity. And you find some customers who are already embracing the cloud and have already started transforming their TV services compared to others who are still running an old generation platform. And the requirements from both sides are completely different. What we do is really to work with partners, and we believe that partners are the solution because AWS is very good at providing the infrastructure, is very good at providing the services needed, but you still need that partner who comes in and develops the solution that perfectly fits that customer. And we're very glad to have Aceto as a very important partner in that equation, because basically what they do is to take the customer requirements, analyze that complexity, look at what's available on AWS Cloud, and quickly respond back with the right solution. So the cloud is not the answer, yes, for everything, correct, but the cloud is a very fantastic enabler to move very quickly and to address this complexity that we've been talking about since the beginning.
I can relate to that. I mean, we talked about complexity before in the ecosystem. I think looking back how things were, 10 years ago, you had all these proprietary technologies. So in a sense, you had a system of 1,000 islands, and you had all this innovation going on all those very small islands. Now we have someone like Amazon coming in, AWS, establishing a base layer, right? And we can all innovate on top of that base layer. That means that, that's a huge shift in mentality. And I also think a huge shift in the efficiencies, right? Just imagine how inefficient things used to be when we all had these proprietary small islands instead of having this horizontal ecosystem that everyone can innovate on top of.
Right, but you're still thinking about this as not a one-size-fits-all approach, Frederick, right? You still feel there's need for variability and tuning to match either the specific considerations of an operator's demographic, market, genre, maybe, or something like that. So there's room for variability both in the initial setup and probably room for evolution as well, right?
Yes, of course. But my point is that the core fundamentals are there, right? Instead of everyone reinventing the wheel, we have a base that everyone can innovate on top of. And AWS is pretty good at innovation as well. So they're releasing lots of stuff every month. So
yeah, and one of the things that I think I'm always reminded about in terms of what the cloud brings to the party is the incredible ability to manage, well, to store initially, to manage, to analyze data. Something that maybe, although it's a common topic of discussion that operators aren't always taking the full advantage of in practice. What do you see from your inside perspective, Mosi, in terms of the extent to which analytics is driving operator business?
Well, as mentioned earlier briefly, I think data lakes and insights and analytics have become a really very important piece of the OTT service. And you look at, customers like Netflix, for example, and basically their recommendation and their analytics engine is very strong and very powerful. And actually, it's one of their key strengths of the service. And I think we have discussed how data lakes are formed and how we are collecting data and putting that in the data lake. And I think the step that comes afterwards is how to benefit from all of that data. And there are in AWS a lot of services that you can use. Take, for example, Amazon Personalize, which is a built-in service through which you can provide a personalized experience to your subscribers using time series events. So basically, by putting that information into the Amazon Personalize, you are immediately capable of providing that, that personalization experience. You look at other services, for example, Amazon Recognition, and that's a service that is capable of basically analyzing images and videos and extracting cognitive information, like who are the actors in that video, or what are the scenes that are being described. Is this a street? Is this a house? Is this nature? So you've got a whole lot of information that can enrich the user experience. And as a matter of fact, you look at the X-ray feature of Amazon Prime Video, and it's very compelling. I mean, now you're capable of watching a video, and all of a sudden you say, "Oh, who is that actor?" And then you say, "Alexa, who is that? Who is that actor?" And then Alexa will find out who that is and will provide you with some information. Or you can also inquire about the soundtrack that is being used. So the user experience is going to be pushed far away from what it has been and what it has been today. And I think the user experience is going to continue evolving dramatically thanks to those data lakes.
I'm sure that's true. Frederick, how do you help your clients to navigate that huge palette of opportunities that the cloud services present?
Yeah, I mean, what we see, typically clients have different maturity levels, right? So you need to adapt your approach to their maturity level. But just from Mosi's discussion here about personalization and data. So we did, for example, we did a POC with a client where we actually used the AWS technology for image recognition to personalize the thumbnail, so that your thumbnail would be different from my thumbnail, and then see how this affected usage, which was quite interesting. And this is, as you can understand, extremely powerful, but it's also very available with the AWS technology stack in a way that previously would have been very, very difficult to do, right? So they are also democratizing many of these things for us and for the customers, and in the end for consumers.
Do you find that your customers are, if you like, already convinced of this analytics kind of feedback loop, or is it something that you need to illustrate and perhaps encourage them to engage in?
Yeah, it's a good point. I think we did the research a couple of months back when we talked to hundreds of clients, and we came up with that we found sort of 4 clusters in terms of maturity. And it seems like you almost need to go past this first phase where you just launch something, because that's the mentality. The first mentality you have is just to launch something. And the next phase is to grow that. And then after those 2 phases, you start to think about how to optimize and evolve the service. And in the latter phases, you're more mature to have these discussions about, let's use data. How can we improve this with data? But we see that it's almost like you have to go through these first 2 phases in order to be receptive of these discussions.
Yeah, and I'm actually of a philosophy these days that makes the sort of maturity curve of any particular service look more like a circle than a kind of a ramp, right? It's
Yes.
a continuous evolution. Things that you experiment with, you learn a bit, and then you change something. Do you see things like that yourself? Or?
Yes, very much so. And this is something we talk to customers about. You need to constantly review things and rip and replace and learn from what you're doing. So that's the agile mindset I was talking about before.
Mosi, is that something that you encourage people to do? To be this kind of like a continuous evolution kind of activity program, I guess?
Yes, absolutely, Steve. So we have, I mean, this is becoming actually how to say very compelling use case and very compelling business model that you can build very quickly. That's the fundamental change, where in the past maybe 5 years this was something that is totally unreachable or would be reached, but only with massive investments.
Right.
The reality is that we have been showing since probably 3 or 4 IBCs ago solutions based on cognitive machine learning and solutions, and we have a number of showcases. For example, automatic subtitling and transcription and translation of the audio. This demo has been there since quite probably few IBCs. You look at other ones about celebrity detection, and then we have also done tremendous efforts in sports highlights and analyzing the sports scene, whether this is for Formula One, for soccer, or for other types of sports. And you look at all the possibilities now that an OTT provider can have, and it's just a matter of building the business case behind it. And I think the return on investment could be really compelling. That's one aspect of all of that, but the other aspect is also related to user engagement. User engagement from the moment you start onboarding that subscriber and then interacting with that subscriber, and then analyzing how the subscriber is perceiving the service and continuing running campaigns. So all of that can also be automated to a large degree, actually, to achieve two benefits: reducing churn, reducing operations cost, but also increasing the customer experience and increasing the customer usage of the service. So I mean, yes, the return on investment is 100% there. Customers are really encouraged to look into that and map that into how these technologies can serve best their TV business.
That's it. That's very exciting. So, Frederick, do you have any examples from your own work about how some of these advanced services have been used in the quest to improve user engagement, improve the experience of the consumer sort of face of the video service?
Yes, we have the thumbnail example I mentioned, but I just to relate to what Mosi said. I mean, if you're really mature, we typically also work with customers not just to automate these things to get the data right, but you can also do A/B testing, so you actually have multiple variants of consumer experiences that you expose to your customers for, and then obviously you will evolve the service based on those findings. But that's fairly complicated, so you need to be quite mature and have some good tech in place to do that, right?
Right. So, and you see the battleground as being not so much content anymore as much more in terms of user experience or engagement levels. Is that where you see the frontier today, or maybe in the near future?
Well, I do think there is. I mean, from a content perspective, you can obviously have a niche service, right? But I think we have everyone is looking at the Netflix experience and maybe we're a bit too looking up a bit too much to them, because I think, yes, if you're running a global service with the scale of Netflix, I think they have the right approach. But if you're running a niche service in India, for example, or somewhere else, I think you can do much more on the user experience side. But I don't think we have seen someone who's really pushed that side. And I think that will be a way to compete moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, there's many different challenges in running an Indian service versus, maybe an English language service in the North American region or something like that, right? The dimensions of the user experience problem are multiplied many times over, wouldn't you say?
Yes, maybe India was the most extreme scenario, but I mean, you get the point, right? You can.
It's a large audience,
more
right? So.
But I used to take the example about ice cream, right? So think about this. 30 years ago, we had vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry. Today, you have, I don't even know where to start, right? All the Ben & Jerry stuff. But I think from a user experience perspective, why would we as consumers not expect to see the same level of refinement when it comes to video services as we are doing with ice cream?
Right.
It's just that we're sort of stuck with the vanilla, chocolate, and strawberry still, because no one has really innovated this. And we look at Netflix as the model for the globe from the global perspective.
Yeah, I definitely think that chasing Netflix is not necessarily the only way to look at this market. Mosi, now you've moved to the US, so I'm hoping you're a big fan of Ben & Jerry's. Maybe you were before, but
Oh, I am, especially the Netflix flavor. It's awesome. I have my wife and my daughter who are really fan of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, but yeah, I mean, to get back to the question, I mean, the first thing remains, I mean, the basis remains the same. The content remains the king here. And this did not change. You look at Netflix, and most of their revenues is coming from original series that have that. And I'm not sure whether Netflix would have the same success, assuming that they did not invest in those programs and those contents. So the same thing happens with the Amazon Prime Video. And so the content remains king, but the user experience, I do agree, is now gaining much more importance in terms of the success of the service. I mean, if the service is launched and does not have a compelling app, a compelling user interface, a comfortable user interface, probably with the required subtitles, with the required recommendation engine, it's very likely that the service will not encounter the same success that it deserves. So yes, the content remains king, and the content remains the key probably reason to launch the service, but the user experience has become very dominant and very compelling in deciding of the success of that service. And you cannot launch a service without a compelling user experience.
And it's my observation that the user experience is becoming more diverse. It's got to be more tuned to the consumption environment of the customer as well, right? So big screen experience is different from small screen experience. My language preference may differ from your language preference, and et cetera, et cetera. Is that the way you see things evolving as well? More sort of hyper targeting?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, you go ahead, Frederick, please.
Both of you can respond for sure. So.
Yeah, I would.
Yeah.
I think many of the things that AWS has in their toolbox is enabling this, right? So the democratizing access to the technology that can do these refinements, right? So I think we've only seen the starting point of this personalization and clustering and regionalization in terms of the user experience.
Mosi, from your point of view?
Yeah, I mean, we discussed that already. So let me take another facet to all of this, which is the video compression and the video distribution side of it. And as you know, in AWS, you could take your own or your preferred transcoding vendor and distribution, a video distribution vendor, and you can deploy it on AWS as a lift and shift. But you have also the other option, which is to run AWS Media Services. And with Elemental Media Services, you have the capability basically to transcode huge libraries of content in a very short time frame, because basically you submit jobs and you do not worry about the infrastructure or how many servers you need to provision. It's all taken, it's all abstracted by the AWS layer. Same thing happens for, yeah, exactly. Same happens for live transcoding, which is even more challenging, because for live transcoding, you just create channels, and those channels are automatically monitored and automatically operated by the AWS infrastructure. So again, you don't need to worry about how large is the server, how many channels I'm going to provision in my server, and what happens if the server breaks down, etc., etc. All of this is abstracted in AWS, and in few clicks, you can create a live channel right now. And literally in few hours, or let us be more realistic, sometimes in a matter of day or two, you can launch a whole head end with hundreds of channels. And this is completely transforming the user experience. And so if we take back the question, I mean, you are a user, you want to access your content, whether this is on your TV screen, probably you need a 4K signal, and then you have a new device with other requirements. You can configure all of that in minutes for your whole live channel or for your whole library in order to serve the user with the best video quality that suits that device. And I think this is unique in the cloud. And we have seen also some signals of that during COVID, where some of the European companies requested some of the OTT vendors, the biggest ones, to basically reduce the bandwidth usage in order to leave room for the basic communication and the basic education and institutional communication. And that was done pretty much overnight by those OTT hyperscalers, because they are leveraging the cloud. With on-premises, the operation would have been much more complicated and much more risky, much riskier for the operation of the service. So this is also one of the advantages of the AWS cloud, is how flexible and how reactive you can be to different market conditions.
So, Frederick, are these kinds of benefits part of what you can offer through the Aceto One lens?
Yes, yeah, we do work with AWS a lot, and I would agree to what Mosi said. I think that's probably the biggest. If we talked about disruption before, the acquisition of Elemental is probably the single biggest piece of disruption, if I would pick one specific piece, because that has really transformed how we see the cloud from a video provider perspective.
Fantastic. Well, I want to ask a sort of final question here that looks a bit ahead to the future. I know everyone's got their own little crystal ball that's perfectly polished and ready to go here. So, you know, it's been quite a ride over the last 10 years. Things are, I think, progressing in an interesting direction, particularly accelerated by today's circumstance. What do you see as things that might shake up the industry again, lead to more change coming up in the next, let's say 5 years or something like that? 10 years is an awfully long way to look ahead, right? The next 5 years, what do you see as things that might potentially shake things up even more? Frederick?
Yes, that's the million-dollar question.
Yes.
I think, to be realistic, I think that the most realistic scenario that I see would cause a lot of change is the continuation and acceleration of the companies buying other companies, right? The consolidation of the industry. That could change things fairly quickly.
The landscape of big providers and has definitely changed a lot over the last 5 years. There's no doubt about that, right? So Mosi had mentioned some of the mergers and demergers that have happened. So that's quite a big change. Definitely. Mosi, you got any opinions about things that are going to shake up our lives going forward?
Yeah, and if I may rely on my telco perspective, which is, as I said in the beginning, is going to put some bias to my statements. But what we are seeing, and we mentioned that earlier, is that the user experience is going to continue evolve in a pace that have never been seen before. And of course, we mentioned AI ML capabilities and how these are transforming the user experience and putting the subscriber in the center of the service. But what's happening as well today is that we're talking more and more about the edge cloud. And telecommunication service providers now are, rolling out these technologies based on services like, for example, Amazon Outposts and Wavelength, who provide actually the framework to run services with very low latency. So basically, you're bringing the whole logic very, very close to where the subscriber is located. And that's something that is going to fundamentally change the user experience, because all of a sudden we can think about yeah, sorry about that. Is it better now?
Yes, yeah. Just pause for a second. So
not yet.
Yeah,
is it better?
We'll edit that bit out.
Yeah, sorry.
Go back 30 seconds if you
All
can.
Right. Yeah. So basically. Okay, yeah, so basically those technologies like Amazon Outposts and Wavelength are going to enable services with very low latency. We're talking about sub 10 milliseconds for a round trip time between the user device or the player and the logic that is basically powering that experience. So that's going to offer a new perspective of user experience capabilities. We're talking as well about the possibility to include now true virtual reality and augmented reality in the user experience. So those are going to push the perimeter far beyond of what we are seeing today, and will increase more complexity, of course, but we're there to help.
Well,
and I think
those are exciting standpoints, exciting viewpoints, right? So
no, absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. And I think also related to that is that we are going to see a lot more cooperation and a lot more partnership between service providers and OTT content providers, who will ultimately have to work hand in hand in order to achieve those experiences and in order to push the entertainment barrier even further than today.
Great. Well, it's going to be an interesting ride for the next few years as well, then, I'm sure, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm going to wrap up here. Many thanks to my colleagues, Mosi, Frederick, for an engaging discussion, and to the whole team at Aceto for putting this together and promoting the experience. Again, please send your comments and questions about the topics here and anything else to marketing@Aceto TV, and those comments will be answered as rapidly as possible by the team at Aceto. While we're here, don't forget to visit some of the other experiences in the virtual IBC landscape. There's at least one more Aceto offering, I think, and lots of interesting content from other organizations. So look around and enjoy yourselves. Even if you can't get to Amsterdam this year, maybe it feels a bit like you'll be in Amsterdam. Enjoy yourselves. Again, thanks to everyone, and I'll sign off here and see you again at some event in the not too distant future, I hope.
Thank you.